You know that one song you can't get enough of? Chances are it was made with a sample from Splice. Explore top packs made by your favorite producers, sketch out song ideas in seconds with Create Mode, and dive into a sample catalog that's so deep, it's dangerous. Find out why Splice is the industry's not-so-secret secret. Visit splice.com and try for free today. Welcome to the Fader Interview. I'm Alex Robert Ross, editorial director of The Fader. Tamara Lindeman wrote Ignorance, her masterful fifth album as The Weather Station, during a time of prolific creativity and deep reflection. It was late 2018, and after finishing a lengthy international tour, she decided to read the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's latest report on global warming. Lindeman had always cared deeply about the environment, as her stage name suggests, but the paper's frank and brutal description of the horrors our collective indifference would bring clarified her mission. Ignorance is not only a work of caustic critique, but also of intense beauty. Blending elements of folk, rock, and jazz, its pop tapestry is both a vehicle for climate justice and a self-contained opus. Still, Lindeman's project was far from over. At 19 tracks and 76 minutes long, Ignorance is more than twice the length of the average weather station record. But there were more songs that didn't fit, stripped down ballads too subtle to match the double EP's singular grandness. 10 of those tracks come out today on Ignorance's companion album, How Is It That I Should Look at the Stars? These are songs so intimate that Lindeman was unsure whether she'd ever want to release them. Live recorded tracks with no percussion, songs that put as much emphasis on silence as texture. It is its own fragile thing, and it's every bit as compelling as its sister project. In advance of the album's release, I sat down with Lindeman to discuss the pain of broken political promises and the daunting task of fitting global themes into quiet, personal songs.
I'm tired of unraveling all their endless skies of truth. Oh, I only want to talk about you. I'm tired. I only want to lie beside my lover tonight.
Congratulations on, I suppose, not the new album, the latest album. It's new in that it's being released now, but not a brand new album. I wanted to just dive straight into the album itself and talk about, which is in the middle of the record, and to go back to the winter in which you wrote both of these albums. You talk about trying to fit the world into a song, and then you sort of somewhat comically have a go at yourself for being a bit lazy. Did you really feel that pressure at the time to write about such weighty topics? Did it feel like a weight on you?
I think that's just the way I always feel, trying to fit the world into a song. That song to me is very me, and it does have a subtle, almost not sense of humor, but I take songwriting very seriously, and I am always trying to fit the world into a song, and of course I can't. So there is, I think, that song has a few threads laid on top of each other, one of which is essentially a song about songwriting and what to say, what to say to the world. And yeah.
Is there even more pressure on an album like this in which you have sort of stripped more layers from it sonically, trying to write about the entire world, to fit the entire world into a song? Does that feel more difficult or easier when you're working with fewer instruments?
I think it would have been a lot of pressure if I'd intended to do any of this, but these were just songs I was just writing almost, just for myself. So when I was writing Ignorance, I did feel a lot of pressure of the next record I wanted to make, and I felt very ambitious about it and what I wanted to achieve thematically and philosophically and musically. As I would, be writing songs, I found that I would do better if there were just moments where I would would let a song just be for myself, and be like, this song is not for the album. This song is not for people. This is just for me. I have a little germ of a song, so I'm just going to complete it and set it aside. And I started to make, a separate column in my notebook where I just kept track of these songs. So I wasn't really intending anyone to hear them. And then when I made the record, my intention wasn't, this is the follow up to this record. It was just like, I just want to record these songs this way for myself. But I do feel pressure generally. Yeah, I as I say, I take songwriting really seriously, and I'm very careful about what I say, and I really care a lot about truth, and I'm deeply cautious in how I write lyrics. So that definitely comes through in that song. But in terms of instrumentation, absolutely, it's the most naked thing to just have a song that is just a song. But luckily with these songs, because my expectations were so low and it was just so clear what they were trying to do, I did feel safe in them to just let them be just as they were.
At what point did you know that you wanted to release the songs that comprise How Is It That I Should Look at the Stars?
It was more that I knew I really loved the record. When I was making it, it was just a very pure, I love this thing. And the decision of whether or not to release it felt way more like a decision that wasn't really in my hands. It felt way more of a decision of like, can you do something like this from a commercial perspective and not just confuse everyone, right? Like, can you do this and not have it take away from what ignorance was? So that was more a question that I always felt a lot of trepidation about, that sort of commercial business side of it. And I felt a certain amount of vulnerable trepidation to release the songs. But yeah, I had enough encouragement and perhaps a sort of optimism to let it out. I think sometimes it's not that I know that I want to do something, but there's a pull to do it anyways. That pulls me out of my own cautiousness, I suppose.
Do you think that after releasing Ignorance, there was maybe a sense that, well, if people can understand this album, which deals with quite complex issues from a personal standpoint and has this interaction between the small and the very large, that if people could comprehend that maybe they could comprehend something like this as well?
That's true, actually. I think that was the case. And also, I remember as I was talking about ignorance and interviews and such, there were times where I would actually be thinking of some of these songs, like the song Stars and the song that became titled Ignorance. Like those songs felt important to me to have out because they felt like they completed the story in this way. And when I would look back at Ignorance, I'd be like, oh, it's not everything I wanted to say is on this record. There's a lot that's scattered between these two records. So that became a force on the side of releasing it as well.
Stars is it's interesting to hear you bring that up, because it's a moment on this record in which you talk explicitly about time. You place the record in a particular moment. You are standing in California. I assume you're standing in California in the desert, and it's New Year going into 2020. Was it strange to have this album sit for, 2 years, I suppose, to a song like that, to have that sit with you for 2 years while the world changes so radically, and now to release it into a completely different world? Does that feel strange? Do you feel differently about the song?
Well, it's interesting because the word's 2020. So when I wrote that, I was thinking about how, for me, and I think a lot of people in our generation, the years when they happened, like 2020 felt so futuristic to me, that we were in 2020 when it happened. And I always think of the years in terms of like climate agreements and climate pledges that have been broken, So a year like 2020, it's like, okay, we have 10 years to cut global emissions by 50% to keep, these are the things that come to mind. It's not like, oh, wow, I can't wait for a brand new year. It feels like the homework assignment is overdue and another year has passed. Like, that's how I feel. I feel like a dread with each passing year that only grows. So that's what I was noting. And also, like I say, 2020, it felt very futuristic, to be entering a new decade. And from a climate perspective, just like a really critical decade that we're still failing to do anything about. So that's what I was thinking about. And when I recorded that song in March 2020, that's still what I was thinking about. But then when the pandemic happened, and I've noticed when I've sang that song live, people like have a response to the phrase 2020, because what people think is, oh shit, the world's about to change, you know. So there's another layer that's been added to the song that was not my intention, but I find it so interesting, where it's like everyone, the words 2020 now is like a collective gasp, or sort of a anxious laughter. And so that's really interesting, that it's the first time I've ever put a year into a song, and it wound up being that year of all years. So yeah.
I felt dizzy, my chest clenched, cold and tight. It'll be 2020 tomorrow night. From Sultan City, I hear fireworks go off, as though they're celebrating another year has cost. Or is it carelessness? Send another star into the sky, only to watch it die.
It should inspire anxiety or anxious laughter, but maybe not in exactly the way that we're taking it. And in that sense, I suppose that song is quite depressingly timeless.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because seen through that lens, it makes me think of the people and the fireworks and the carelessness. And it really feels even more poignant because 2019 still to me feels like this heightened time of like excess, you know, like this sort of like the last year of before we lost our innocence. And I felt that I had already lost my innocence, but I feel like, you know, in the world, you know, a lot has changed since then.
Does your relationship with a song change over time just through the passage of events? Do you have a different relationship with yourself by the time that you write a song? Does it almost in the end feel like you're sort of covering yourself after it's been so long?
Absolutely. It's a really complicated relationship. And I think what I've found in myself is that the mark of a song that's good for me, like when I know that a song was good, is that I can sing it years later and still be finding different layers that I hadn't thought of at the time. And I don't know if this is always going to be the case. I feel like it's something that's changing in me now, but there's always parts of the song where there are things you've hidden from yourself, and so you put them into a song, and the song is like often like the upwelling of some aspect of your psyche that you can't face or don't know how to fully face. So, you know, I've been, honestly, I'm in a period of change in my life right now personally, and I had a rehearsal the other day and I was singing my songs with my band, and I was kind of like floored by all these aspects of them that suddenly, in where I'm at right now, were hitting me in this completely different way. And it was sort of a bit frightening. Honestly, it's a lot, but I think it's so interesting to have this record of, you know, my consciousness through time. Yeah, I don't feel that I'm covering myself, but I absolutely feel a sense of, especially to return to the songs that, you know, All of It Was Mine or any of those older songs, I feel like a sense of, you know, even the self-titled, I see this person as like a younger person who's trying to, like, you know, I see places where maybe I was kind of trying to show off a bit, and I regret. That's always my biggest regret, where I was like, I was showing off. That wasn't real. You know, like I see the little cracks. I see places where I thought I had connected to ideas, but I hadn't. You know, like I see those cracks in a way that no one else would. But I also feel a sense, of just sort of how interesting that this young person was trying to do things. And mostly I just find when I look back, my songs are so much stranger than I realized they were. And I'm kind of astonished that anyone has ever liked them, but I'm grateful, obviously, that they are as strange as they are. Yeah.
This album, the one word that you've used to describe it already is fragile, and you said the last one was sort of the other side of the coin. So compared to the other side of this coin, it is a fragile sounding record and a fragile feeling record, but there's something very important in that fragility that maybe connects to something that beyond just yourself. You know, there's a line that you use actually in the press materials for this. You say, to understand where we are today is to directly confront fragility. What does that mean to you in the context of, yes, climate change and climate action and where we're at right now?
It's interesting because I definitely look back at both records and I'm like, why on earth did I think any of this was a good idea? You know, why would I write a song? Like all of the songs seem so intense and confrontational in a way. And there's a lot of fragility and a lot of self-reflection that isn't flattering. And so I find it so interesting that I was just so desperate to write these songs and get them out in the world. And what I see is like what the power of the records, or what is good about these records, I think, is that it connects to this essential issue and this essential problem of now, where we can't face our fragility. You know, like that keeps showing up on both these records, you know, but especially Ignorance. I mean, it's literally called Ignorance. It's like, you know, like the person in loss, like cannot face loss. They can't face fragility, right? And that is the like veil that's over the world and that I'm trying to pull aside, right? As a person and with my music and with everything I'm doing is because I think that in order to face, you know, whether it's COVID-19 or the climate crisis, like that's what's always at the heart. That's what we can't face. I mean, why would anyone become an anti-vaxxer? You know, there's a fear of fragility, right? There's a fear of vulnerability that causes you to turn away from the truth. And with climate, it's particularly acute. I mean, why can't we talk about it? Why can't we face it? I think it just comes down to fear, because when we face it, we realize, you know, how vulnerable we are. And so I think that when I look back on why in God's name did I think it was a good idea to make this really gentle, you know, not trendy record, let alone release it, you know, and I think that maybe that was the pull, right? Like maybe that was what was pushing me through just being so fragile and in public feels important to me, I guess.
I thought about the man who called it a magpie, confronted by the great expanse of his ignorance. He wanted to name it, to detain it forever in that small phrase. It seemed like a shame to give it a name. But then again, I don't understand anything the way I'm supposed to. I drag every river for meaning, scrape my hand on every ceiling. I never know what to say or not say, what to honor or betray in any given day.
Effectively, without meaning to flatten that's almost a political decision then, to confront, or political maybe even minimizes it, but it's an essential decision. Like if we're going to confront issues like climate change, if we're going to confront the things that are really important for sort of our continued survival, we have to effectively do the same work that you were talking about with your earlier music, which is understand that fragility and make ourselves comfortable with it. And the only way out is through.
I agree. Yeah, that's what I truly believe. And yeah, I'm just trying to do that in every way I can. Yeah.
Add even another layer of pressure when you feel that you have to be fragile. Like as an artist, there's enough things taking from you, right? Like you have to literally perform your work for people, to then add fragility as like a political and ethical decision on top of all that. Sounds like it would be quite draining after a while.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've definitely felt a lot with performing the songs. I only was able to do one tour so far, but it's a lot. It's very emotional, and I do feel a little bit insane. I mean, we were touring across Canada and I was playing in like Saskatoon or, you know, somewhere in front of all the nice folk festival crowd that I think kind of expected, you know, maybe a bit more like girl with an acoustic guitar. And I'm wearing my weird fringe suit that I made that I look like some sort of like like a Sesame Street monster or something. And I'm like, and I keep like, when I sing these songs, I keep wanting to be on the ground. So I'm often like, feel like I should be on my knees or like crawling or something. And I'm like, I'm a little afraid of how this is coming across. and a show too. I mean, there's so many aspects where you're like, okay, I need to work, I need to be on pitch and I need to sing on time. And there's all these elements that are technical. And so to bring, you're right, that to bring sort of what I intend to present emotionally, like I don't always succeed. And I don't feel like I've got it figured out yet. I feel like there's a whole element of the show that I just haven't quite nailed, and like I'm not there yet. But when I can get there, I just feel like it's so transcendent, and I feel like I'm doing what I need. I feel a beautiful sense of, fate, or, like I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing, and I feel like this, yeah, just incredible sense of direction that I feel like I've never had in my life. And it's one of the most important things that's really happened to me in my life. Yeah, it's definitely hard, but it's also easy, because to me it's a lot easier than going out on stage and trying to be what I think I'm supposed to be, whatever that is, whether it's like a cool, indie rock artist or like a folk, whatever, these expectations. Like, I just feel so grateful to not have to do anything I don't want to do. So it's really exciting too. And I've realized too, it's like I can be on stage and like, I used to feel like I was supposed to move in a certain way. And now I'm just like, sometimes I just stand like completely still for a really long time. And that works too, right? Like, I think everybody responds to honesty, really.
I know what you mean about going to, say, Saskatoon and people maybe expecting somebody to show up with an acoustic guitar, because the history and the legacy of music that asks questions like your music asks, like folk music often is like very, very spare and not in the same way as this album. Is there something particularly valuable, do you think, in upending that, in making, yes, slightly difficult and interesting? And I saw somebody describe Ignorance as a muscular album, this album that plays off pop music of the 1980s and orchestral feel. Is it important to upend those expectations of folk music in order to effectively confront an audience, or is it more of a Trojan horse? You're trying to work your way into that audience and then present them with these challenges.
I mean, it's so funny because I don't really know what folk music is. Like, what is it? I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's always this concept where I really don't know what it means, other than acoustic guitar or acoustic banjo or acoustic violin. I mean, these are things that, or mandolin. These are things that people think, if there's those instruments there, it's folk. I was making a joke recently with my friend Karen, where I was like, if there's a saxophone on the record, it is a jazz record. Which is not at all true. Like, jazz is a genre that is, truly based in like musical properties. But yeah, I don't know if I care much about what folk is or folk in general, but I do definitely, I think when I look back at what I've always been doing, it is always subtly subversive in ways that I don't think I even necessarily realized, because I think there are expectations. When I made All of It Was Mine, it certainly went over better than my first record, which was like a weird soundscapey, like super dramatic, heavy, insane record. So I was like, I meet certain, Western standards of appearance, and, I present as very feminine and all of these things, right? And my voice is pretty, and I sort of just realized, instead of like fighting against all of these things, I could just take them as a part of the package and let them be. And then I get to choose what I do with that, right? I get to choose what I do with the way I appear and the way that I sing. And yeah, I mean, I definitely think that songs are sneaky. And there's lots of songs through history that are beautiful. Like, I've thought of that concept of a song as a Trojan horse, where it's like, especially a pop song, where if it's really catchy, you're going to wind up singing it. And you're stuck with these lyrics, right? Like, there's all sorts of songs that I know the lyrics to and I can sing along. And then I'm like, wait, what am I saying? Do I agree with this? Do I feel comfortable with this? And I think that with Ignorance in particular, I was just really excited to kind of play with that a little bit. And I'm still excited for the future. That's something that's still exciting me as a concept of like, how can I make something that's so presentable that it just goes right in there? And then you're forced to reckon with what it says, right? And this record too, I wasn't thinking so much about that, but absolutely, like, I think I really love when other people make like really experimental avant-garde music that's really challenging, and like that's music I like and I enjoy. But I do also like that I like approachable music. You know, I like that I make approachable music that anyone can listen to, and you know, you can hear it as just something that sounds nice in the background, or you can like listen to it deeply, and everything in between. And I like the idea of making music that works at every piece along that sort of spectrum.
I wonder if after that winter that you had, where you were particularly engrossed in this, in almost in a sort of revelatory way, and you're writing, I suppose, quite frantically because you've produced an extensive body of work in a short period of time. If you didn't just want to scream at everyone about this rather than sing in that way, and that if at times it's difficult not to be more confrontational in the music, and if it takes a certain amount of restraint to write in this fashion.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was that person. Like, I definitely was that person on social media. It's a thing that happens to you, and I've seen it happen to other people around me, where it's like you get radicalized by this knowledge, right? And then you're suddenly that person, you know, on Facebook, you know, getting angry and yelling at your relatives, you know, like, and I don't think I yelled at my relatives, but I definitely like, I had that anger, and I went to a town hall meeting with my MP, and I like stood up and disrupted it, and I was like, what about this? And everyone like applauded, you know, like I had those moments where I was that person, and I think there's importance to that. It's not, I think I realized who I am. I just felt very angry and I was trying to express that, and I didn't know how. And these songs were just an aside. I wasn't thinking of them really to do with like climate advocacy. I just thought like, oh, well, climate's showing up here because I'm feeling a lot of anger. I wonder if anyone will notice. But it was more like I was more channeling that anger on like social media or other places like that, or, you know, marches or whatever. But, you know, I don't feel restrained in songs. I feel like they're very realistic and truthful to how to, I think they capture my inner battle and my feelings. And at this point, I actually like don't really feel much anger at anyone except like Joe Manchin, and you know, like there's a few, there's politicians and fossil fuel executives, and everyone else I'm just like, we're all just struggling, you know, like I have zero anger or judgment, to the extent that like I think people like want me to have it, and I just don't. It's just not how I feel. But yeah, I don't think songs are just where I can really express that kind of advocacy. Like I just don't think it works there. I think it's much better suited in like real life, you know, or social media or whatever kind of like written platforms. And it's been a while like since I've really engaged there, maybe in part because my anger, and I think honestly I got really like burned out for a while, which I'm just realizing of like you get burned out and you get angry and you kind of back away, and I hope I can come back to that. But it was a rough year or two in the climate space. So yeah, it's hard where you lose the feeling that you could make a difference, you know. And so I've had a bit of that, but I think that primarily my desire as a person is to reach people in other ways. Like I just don't think, I think that the thing that's missing from the way that most people have been talked to about this issue is like love and acceptance. And so that's what I feel I want to put into the world now.
And that's a quite circular, because to go back to where we began this conversation, to talk about, it's quite interesting you saying nobody wants to drag themselves through the endless ruins of all there is in this world that is not love. And again, I think that, I mean, I know that there's a sort of a wink and a nudge there to like draw people in, but it was interesting even when there was a bit of humor involved, to see love and the world almost put at odds, as if they were not in conflict, but it is as if writing about the world and writing about love was separate, because it felt to me that these songs were all coming from that same place.
You're right. That's a real thread in that song. I mean, it goes. My mind just goes into this whole big thing of like, what is love? You know, what are we thinking of? What are we talking about when we mean love? And you know, I start thinking about all these ideas and concepts. But I think that, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of dehumanization in the world right now. That's what I feel. Our society has become very dehumanized. You know, it's very dehumanizing. And so I think when I think of love, I think of something that's so human and so present, actually, when you start to pay attention.
I mean, that's a really beautiful place to end. Like, it would be almost irresponsible for me to continue talking after that. Like, that's such
You can put that at the end.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to. Tamara, that's beautiful. I should actually let you go. I've taken half an hour from you. Thank you so much for making time to talk to me. Congratulations again on the album, and I'm really excited for it to come out. I'm sure you are too.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, thank you so much thank you for the thoughtful questions.
Of course. Okay, speak soon. Good luck with everything.
Okay, bye.
It's only the end of an endless time. I wake up in my home bed, the curtain open wide to let in what light the sky has to offer today. It's only the end.
That was Tamara Lindeman talking to The Fader. The Weather Station's new album, How Is It That I Should Look at the Stars, is out today via Fat Possum. The Fader interview is engineered by Tony Giambroni. The executive producer is Alex Robert Ross, and the associate producer is Salvatore Macchi. We'd like to thank Loughton Audio for providing our microphones. You can find them online at lautenaudio.com. And we'd like to thank James Ivey for providing our intro music. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd appreciate if you left a rating and a review. And don't forget to keep an eye on thefader.com for essential music news, interviews, and essays. We'll be back soon with another episode of The Fader Interview. Goodbye until then. You know that one song you can't get enough of? Chances are it was made with a sample from Splice. Explore top packs made by your favorite producers, sketch out song ideas in seconds with Create Mode, and dive into a sample catalog that's so deep, it's dangerous. Find out why Splice is the industry's not-so-secret secret. Visit splice.com and try for free today.